Hi, it's Claire at CK Chemistry, and in this video I would like to talk about predicted papers because of their growing popularity, and maybe discuss a little pros and cons and the best way to use them if you are going to use them, address some myths, both positive and negative, about their use as well. And so I'm only going to be looking at A-level chemistry because that is my specialism. So any of these comments aren't really relevant to, say, I don't know, GCSE English, for example. Another thing to point out, I'm gonna look at what they are. What do we mean when we say what a predicted paper is, and maybe what a predicted paper isn't, because it's a very unusual little term that's cropped up over the last few years. We're going to talk about, are they worth the hype? Now, I'm going to try in my scientist way to be quite unbiased. Obviously, I will be slightly biased because I produce predicted papers, but at least I can then give you my perspective on what goes into it and that kind of thing. And definitely some do's and don'ts. Okay, so some good ways to use them and some ways not to use them. Because actually, I think my main summary is that, like anything else, they are a tool, like a weather forecast. Okay, so I'm a mountain leader as well, and if I'm going to go out in the mountains, I'm going to look at the weather forecast. If I'm going to go out for 2 or 3 days, I'm definitely going to look at the weather forecast, and it gets less and less accurate, right? The longer you go. Maybe I'm going on a trip somewhere abroad, then you're going to have to look maybe a week ahead. Now, if the weather forecast says it's going to be absolutely peeing down with rain, then you're definitely going to be much better prepared if you know about it. If the weather forecast says that it's going to be sunny, you're still going to pack a raincoat, right? So therefore, that was how I would say it with predicted papers. Just because a predicted papers predict something, you're not going to ignore the rest of your revision, or hopefully. So let's go in a bit more detail. What do we mean by a predicted paper? So this term isn't like, if you were just doing your A-levels now, you might be really used to it. But the reason that you're really used to the term predicted papers is because actually they didn't really come about until 2022. And this is the Google search term history. Obviously, each of those periods is summer exam time. Nobody's searching for them in November, as you can see. And the reason that they kicked off in 2022, so we are coming out of the pandemic. We've got students who've not done their GCSEs going to take their A-levels. A lot of disruption to learning over the past 2-3 years. And so in that year, the exam boards produced something called the advanced notice, which told students what's going to be on the paper. Like, these topics are going to be on it and these topics aren't going to be on it on each paper. And what happened was some enterprising people then made practice papers based on that, and they called them predicted papers because predicted papers sounds better than practice, because it sounds like we know, and we did know some idea of the topics that were coming up. And then the thing about Google and search terms is that if everybody's searching for predicted papers and you're making a practice paper, you're going to call it a predicted paper. And that's what I had to do. I've been making these since 2022, actually. So I did start right at the beginning. This 22, 23, 24. Yeah, this is my 4th year of making predicted papers. And, in my heart, I probably would, because I feel like, I don't feel like a fraud exactly, but I would rather call them something more accurate. Like, they're a practice paper based on past prediction, on past topics. But basically, if you don't call them predicted papers, nobody will find your website because that's what students are searching. So that's what they get called. As simple as that. And so they've got increasingly popular, as you could see from that graph. There are lots of different companies that make them. They are usually downloadable PDFs. A lot of places now are trying to sort of lock their papers down so that you can only look at them on the website, or only look at the mark scheme on the website. I don't do that, possibly to my detriment. Maybe people are sharing my stuff for free everywhere. At least if you could just keep my name on it so that people go to my website, that would be nice. I know I'm not going to be a millionaire anyway, but it would be nice if you didn't completely like rip my work off. Some of them are only printable, so like you have to wait for them in the post, which is not ideal if you want to get on with it. The various prices. Obviously, if you're going to have a paper one posted, it will cost more. Some of them I think are overpriced. Some of them are free, and that's great. So it gives lots of people lots of options. That's one bonus about lots of people making them. And many of them come with walkthrough videos, including mine. So for my last 2 years, I have been making walkthrough videos with a lot more explanation. Now, of course, the issue with predicted papers is they're not regulated at all. And sometimes when it is a bigger company, you have no idea who makes them. So yeah, you don't know what that person's experience is. It's not like it's got an author name on it or something, so you don't necessarily know who makes it. Sometimes the companies do put the name of who makes it on there. And the other thing to realise is, of course, the people who write the predicted papers have not seen the actual exam paper. Now, they may be examiners like me. I do examine, but examiners don't see, so the people who mark the exam papers don't see the exam paper before you do. Your teachers don't see the exam paper before you do. Okay, so even the person who runs exams in the school, it gets opened in that package when you're sat in the exam hall. Now, of course, the people who write the exam paper, they've seen it. So the people who work for OCR or AQA, if they are writing a predicted paper, that's a massive breach. Obviously, the whole thing would have to get like destroyed. That's they're not going to do that. They're just not. Okay, it's not worth their jobs. So if anyone says that they've got the actual 2025 paper, or that they've seen the 2025 paper and they're going to tell you what's in it, do not believe them, because it is so extremely unlikely that that's true. And it should not just be around, if we're going to call it a predicted paper, then what I do is spend a very long time looking at trends and patterns, and making sure that I understand what's come up year on year, and also some other trends and patterns, like are these types of questions changing in any way? Are they getting certain types of calculations getting more common, etc. So predicted papers, I want to do a little comparison here with past papers, because obviously past papers are free. They are available from your exam board. Predicted papers, some of them are free and some of them are like, variety of different prices. And personally, obviously everyone should be using past papers. So this is just maybe some pros and cons and things to think about. So you've got the last 8 years of past papers now. I'm including 2024 with that, hoping that your school's already given you that, or you may have had it as a mock. And then predicted papers, depending where you get them from, you can get potentially 3 to 4 years worth. So I've got 3 years worth of predicted papers on my website, and some other people that got in on it quite quickly have the same thing. Some people have only just started doing it this year. So that gives you, the good thing about that is it gives you lots of choice. Okay, you have lots and lots of past papers. You shouldn't be running out particularly. I will say a little bit more about the mark schemes and other things though in a minute. So obviously the past papers are the gold standard. They are written and checked by experts. They still have errors, random, but they still occasionally have some little weird things that get in. But generally, of course, they are really precisely matched to your exam board. With predicted papers, sometimes it's difficult to tell who writes them. So not for my website, that's me. I'm the only one who works here, right? So I do have people, teachers and students, helping me practice the papers and check over them and proofread and stuff. But yeah, I'm the one that writes them. I've got 20 years of A-level chemistry teaching, examining, working with exam boards experience. So sometimes, though, if it's a big organisation, you don't know. Now, the thing about past papers is they do vary in difficulty, and I don't agree with the whole idea of constantly going back over grade boundaries and trying to match grade boundaries to the past papers, because it doesn't just depend on how hard the paper is, it actually depends on who's sitting the paper, as we know from COVID times. So be a little bit careful with grade boundaries. Please don't make that the point of you doing past papers. The point of you doing past papers is past paper practice under exam conditions of unseen questions. And for that reason, I do not put grade boundaries on my predicted papers. If you want a rough rule of thumb, I would say 85 to 90% is your A star, 75 to 85 is A, and so on. Sort of like 70% for a B, looking at 60% for a C, etc. So they are very rough because you can't really tell, and of course you've got 3 papers. So giving an individual grade for one paper is not really relevant. The big problem with past papers, though, is that by the time you come to do the proper practice of sitting down to do a whole exam, which is very different to doing topic questions, you've most likely seen pretty much all of these questions before, because your teacher will have given them to you in their tests, in your mocks. You would probably done lots of mocks. A lot of colleges do loads for their year 12 and year 13. And of course, if you're diligent, you will have done practice questions. Like, I want to do a total load of questions about benzene. So you will have seen them before. And even if you can't remember exactly, it's not the same as sitting something that you've not seen before. So I would say the big benefit of a predicted paper is it's giving you questions that are like your real exam, but ones that you know that you haven't seen before. Okay. Which is much more realistic as to how it's going to be when you walk into the exam room. So many students come out of an exam and go, that was the hardest one I've ever done. That was harder than anything I've done before. And the reason that they do that is either because they've not practiced properly, or because they have practiced, but they've seen all the questions before when they did it in exam conditions. Of course, all past papers come with mark schemes, and very helpfully, they also come with examiners' reports. Try to use examiners' reports if you get the time, or your teacher might talk you through some of the stuff. So the examiner's report for each year tells you what students were commonly getting wrong or confusing. And of course, the mark schemes give you lots of additional guidance as well. Now, predicted papers should come with full mark schemes. It is quite variable as to how much detail they give. And so if you're wanting extra guidance when you're not a marker, so you're not an actual A-level chemistry teacher, sometimes it can be hard to understand the mark scheme. So many of them now have walkthrough videos which actually give you more detailed explanation as well. Okay, so some do's and don'ts. If you're going to use them wisely, like a tool, like anything else. So I would say, of course, if you're going to use predicted papers, use them alongside as a supplement to past papers and not instead of. Make use of previous years. So I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't want the 2024 predicted paper. What's that got to do with anything? It's 2025 now. Well, don't be silly. It's a prediction. So it's still a whole exam paper based on the topics that come up in paper 1 or in paper 2. You wouldn't say, I'm not going to do 2024 past exam paper for practice. So why would you turn down 2024 predicted paper? Remember, it's not about the predictions. It's about the practice. Here's a really important one. This is specifically for A-level chemistry, and this is for your past papers as well. Please do some paper 3s before you do paper 1 and paper 2. Don't be waiting to practice that, because paper 3 is synoptic, and sometimes you might do a paper and there's a whole topic that's not on paper 1, but then it's really big in paper 3, and then next year it's in paper 1, that topic, okay, because paper 3 can have any topic at all. So therefore, like, you've got to use the paper 3s to help prepare you for paper 1 and paper 2 as well. Okay, there could be a really tricky NMR question in a paper 3 that actually next year comes up in paper 2. Do you get my idea? So please make sure that you don't have to do all of them. You may not have time, but paper 2 and paper 3 are pretty close together anyway. And use them under exam conditions. This is the same for past papers as well as predicted papers. Don't just sit there and like just look at them. Do it, time yourself, give yourself the right amount of time, give yourself a periodic table and a data sheet and a calculator, a proper calculator, one of these, not your phone, and do it properly so that you're getting practice for the real thing. And use them a week or two before the real exam. Don't be leaving them until the night before. That is not good exam prep. Because if you then do it and you realise there's a great big hole in your revision that you completely forgot about, or want some more practice on, you don't really have a lot of time to action that. So of course, don't use them instead of past papers. Don't get too complacent. Some of them are easier than others. So, you know, sometimes it's difficult to write kind of imaginative questions, so they might just be like really similar to previous year's papers, and that might not be the case for your real exam, so be careful. Also, don't panic if they're too hard. So I tend to write fairly challenging predicted papers because I would rather you had something a bit more challenging as a practice, rather than have a super easy practice paper and then not be prepared for a challenging real paper. But don't panic, because sometimes the reason they're hard is maybe there's a tiny mismatch, something you don't really need to know, or maybe it's just that the wording isn't quite what you're used to. So again, because they are not so scrutinized, some of them, I'm not going to mention any names because I'm a professional, some of them have massive errors and some of mine have little errors in too. A point on that, if you think you find an error in a predicted paper, one thing I will point out is that you know who wrote it, me. So if you think you find an error, email me, I will reply. I will either tell you, no, it's not an error, this is why you thought it was an error, but actually this is what the question means. Or I might say, oh my goodness, there is an error, I'm going to fix it and I'll change it. Don't just download it and go straight to the mark scheme or straight to the walkthrough video. Make sure you do it under exam conditions first, and that's the same for your other papers. Okay, make sure you really have a go. Don't give up on yourself too easily. A lot of students, they look at a question, they go blank, and they're like, quick, look at the mark scheme. You're not giving your synapses a chance to actually try if you do that. Okay, and they need that stretching before your exam. And of course, just don't, my record is somebody bought one at 7 a.m. on the day of that exam. That's probably a bit late, I'm not gonna lie. Feel free, I guess. If it helps, it helps. But they're not meant to be for last minute cramming. They're not meant to be based your whole revision on. They are another practice material. Speaking of practice materials, you may have decided, you know what, save my money, I don't need to buy predicted papers, and fair play. I've got free stuff on my website, including retrieval practice quizzes. I've got other practice questions that have walkthrough videos for free. I've got a set of 50 multiple choice questions. I've got things that are not free, so if you don't want the papers but you actually want to have some more detailed tuition to cover particular topics, I've got a 1-day intensive revision course in May half term for AQA, OCRA. I've got revision packages which will only cost you a £5 for the next month for you to go through some really detailed stuff. And as well as the practice papers and predicted papers, I also sell booklets of calculations questions and extended response questions. So any other questions, drop them in the comments and I will reply as soon as I can. Good luck for your exam. Whether or not you use predicted papers, that's probably not going to be the decider.